Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. Today I'm setting up my recording workstation again. So on a recent podcast stream, linked down below on the second channel, Caradog and I built up a new PC for my general purpose workbench. So I'll put the specs of this on screen just for the train spotters. It's nothing terribly exciting, but it replaces an old computer that was getting a bit long in the tooth and just very worn out. And I did a clean install of Windows on this just to clear out gremlins and trash and stuff like that. So I need to set up OBS from scratch. So I figured I'd actually record the process so you guys can see how my recording workflow actually works. So just a heads up in advance, this is not a recommended workflow. Like, there's a lot of jank in this and there's a lot of really esoteric stuff that I do just because of reasons. I'll try to explain those as I go, but this is not a setup that is intended to be emulated. But the reason why I'm showing this is just because A, it just shows you how I record my videos, and B, maybe you can take some inspiration from it. You know, even though you shouldn't copy it directly, you might go, oh, that would solve a problem that I have. So whatever, here we are. So firstly, let's just do a very brief tour of the hardware that's here. So firstly, starting with lighting. So the room is illuminated by 9 of these LED panels. These are balanced to daylight white light. And I think each one of those panels is 3,000 lumens, and there's 9 of them across the room. So there's a lot of room light already. Then I have this big softbox, which lights up my face and mostly the desk. Softboxes are awesome. They take up a lot of space, but they give really, really beautiful diffused light that knocks out all the shadows, and they're not too they're not too hard on the eyes either, because when you're standing in front of bright studio lights, they are dazzling, so it's nice to have one that's a bit less aggressive directly above my screens. Then I've got a key light on the left here, just adding more light to my face and the bench. And then finally, there's another key light at the back here. That's a hair light, and that lights up the back of my head and just makes me pop out from the background a little bit more. Throws down some contrast. So next, let's quickly cover audio. So audio is not super exotic. I've got this Samson CO1U condenser microphone. This is just a USB condenser microphone. I don't think this microphone is still around anymore, but it's been a great microphone. I've had it for years. It's got a really good long-range pickup on it, so I don't have to have it too close to my face, which keeps it fairly out of the way while I'm working. And then, as you can see, I've just got that on just a clamp stand, just so that can lean over the equipment. I have it mostly pointing down, so when I'm leaning down over a laptop, it's still picking up my voice. I've been very tempted, like I could have it coming down over the top easily and stuff like that, but the problem with that is, with the condenser microphone especially, and just most microphones, you want to be trying to speak into the microphone if possible. If I have it like leaning down from above, as soon as I'm bending down over a laptop or the device I'm working on, my voice is just going to become muffled. So while this is a little bit in the way, I've got to lean under it to pick up hot air and things like that. It's a pretty good compromise as far as I'm concerned. So that's the microphone. Moving on to the cameras. So the cameras, we've got 2 Insta360 Link 1 cameras. So this one is just on this arm that leans over the top of the monitors. This is the bench cam that looks down. And these are the Link 1s, so they are full 3-axis movement. So they're effectively self-leveling. So as I move this guy around or up and down, it automatically levels, so I don't have to spend a lot of time centering it and stuff like that. And then I just swing this guy out the way when I don't need it. Then there's another Link 1 up here. That's the face cam. Obviously, these are looking down at the moment, but when they're on, they look up. So yeah. And both of those are on stands behind the desk, so any shaking on the desk won't jog the cameras as well. Then I've got a Logitech Brio here. This guy looks down at the multimeter, so that's the multimeter cam. Yep, does the job. Kind of overkill if I'm honest, but yeah, it just means that I get that view. I like the multimeter cam. Lots of people have said, oh, why don't you use like a digital multimeter or something like that? You can get USB interfaces. I like to have a camera looking at a literal portable multimeter, because this way people can see what kind of meter I'm using and how it's set up. so they know it makes it easier for people to reproduce what I'm doing because they can see I'm using an ordinary multimeter and I have the dial in this position, kind of thing. So that's that. Then finally, we've got the microscope. I'm currently using this Tomlov 4K microscope. This was a review sample. However, I'm ashamed to say I never got around to putting out the review video. So sorry about that, Tomlov. Hopefully this slightly makes up for it. This has been great, this scope. So these things are pretty affordable and it gives a really clear picture for both myself and for the video. It is autofocus, which is, it's not bad. It's nice because you can get exact focus, but sometimes it's very annoying having to push the button and wait for it to autofocus instead of just being able to just twist the dial slightly. So I could take or leave the autofocus. And then the lighting on that, this is a Paul Daniels ring light. Which has really high CRI, high quality LEDs on it, which gives really, really clear lighting. These things are incredible. Highly recommended. The little weird wiring setup I've got at the back of it here, there's a 19 volt input to the ring light, and then this is a buck converter stepping down to 5 volts going to the USB input of the microscope. So this way the whole rig is powered from a single laptop charger going into the ring light. So it just reduces cable clutter. And then this guy has a HDMI cable that goes back to a capture card on the computer. So that's the physical setup. So let's get some HDMI capture going, and then I'll show you how we're going to set up OBS to capture all of this stuff. Cool, so let's start from the desktop. I've already installed OBS Studio, so if you haven't done that, then you want to do that beforehand. And also, if your cameras require any additional software, like my Insta360 links use the Insta360 link controller software, you want that on hand as well. So let's fire up OBS Studio. There's a new version, of course there is. Okay, we'll do that later. All right, so I am going to, we'll leave this on this layout for now. When I'm using OBS, I typically have it snapped to one side like this, so it doesn't take up the entire screen, because you don't need OBS to be full screened, but I'll leave it full screened just for brevity here. So the first thing I want to do is set up my settings on this. So we're going to quickly zip through these. So the stuff that I care about, I forget. We'll find out. Firstly, I want to set the canvas resolution. So I record a 4K canvas. So I'm going to set my canvas resolution to 3840 by 2160. Then the output or scaled resolution. So this is what we are capturing at, and then we might want to scale that down for the final output. However, I want to capture it native, so we're just going to set this to 3840 by 2160, so there's no downscaling happening at the output. And we're going to be recording at 60 FPS, so we're going to dial in 60 there as well. Cool, that's the video done. In the audio, I'm just going to dial in a couple of inputs here. You can change these as and when, so it doesn't super matter, but I'm just going to set the desktop audio channel to my speakers, so high definition audio, and I'm going to set my main microphone to my Samson CO1U. So again, you can swap these around on the fly, so this isn't super important, but it just means that the defaults are nice and configured. And we've set everything else to disabled, so it's not trying to capture or output to anything unexpected. Right, now our output I'm going to set to advanced, and I'm not going to set up streaming on this configuration. If we were streaming, this is going to depend on where you're streaming to. So we're going to skip past this because it's outside the scope of this video. For how to set up the streaming tab for OBS, you're going to want to look up OBS streaming for Twitch or for YouTube or to whatever platform you're sending to. However, recording we do want to set up. So I think I want custom. Yep, we want to output to file. I'm going to spit it out into the videos folder. I'm going to use MKV. Then my bit rate I'm going to set to 20 megabits. So that's 20,000 kilobits per second. So 20 megabits. And this is appropriate for 4K recording. If you're recording at like 1080p, you can knock that down to like 10 megabits. The exact number is going to depend on quality. Like this is going to be limited by how good your cameras are and stuff like that. There's, you know, like if you're using the cheapest of the cheap webcams that has a really crappy grainy image, then it doesn't help to record at 100 megabits. That's not going to get you any more quality because you don't have that kind of you don't have that bitrate coming out the camera in the first place. So there are diminishing returns to this, and for a 4K canvas, 20 megabit is a pretty good baseline. It's also worth remembering that if you're uploading to YouTube, YouTube is going to butcher your final video anyway. This is something that creators often complain about, and they're not kidding. Trust me, if you saw the YouTube video compared to the output from my video editor, you'd be like, wow, what the hell? You know, it's terrible. So yeah, so we're going to record at 20 meg. And I'm not going to change any of the other custom settings here. The video encoder is the bit that I care about. Normally, I used to record in Flash video, but I think I can get away with using AV1 these days because I've now got an AV1 encoder, which should net me some better quality per bit rate. I need to check if other considerations are, I used to record in the Flash video format because that can, because number one, you can pause the video while you're recording, but also number two, when you're recording in Flash, it is a streaming format. So if the computer crashes mid-recording, you don't lose the recording. And that can be really important because if I've been recording for an hour and then my PC crashes, I've just lost the entire video. So having a pausable format is very important. I'm not sure if I can do this with AV1. I will check this after the fact. So yeah, you need to do some research as to what you want to use. I want to switch to AV1. I need to do some testing with that. Failing that, Flash is a very safe format to record to. However, it's old. I transcode my videos after recording, which is something I'll talk about more later in the video. So that's what we're rolling with. That should do for now. The audio bitrate 160 is completely fine. That's that. Stream, we're not setting this up. And I think that's all we need here. Okay. So now we have a canvas. We have a 4K canvas and we are set to 60 FPS. Let's start adding things. So in OBS, we have scenes and we have sources. So a scene is a layout of stuff, so what things are visible at any given time, and sources are the things that can be visible. So a source could be a camera, it could be a window capture, it could be an audio source, and so on. So my standard setup, I'm going to delete this default scene. Oh, there needs to be at least one. Okay, I'm going to add a scene and I'm going to call it 4K tile and delete the default. Whoop, be gone. And the way I record is I have all of my sources in a tile format. So let's start adding stuff. So let's start with the face cam. So I'm going to add a video capture device and we're going to call this face cam. And I'm going to use Insta360 link. So which one is which? Hey, first time. Hello. So Insta360 link, we're going to use that one. It's going to be, I'm going to dial in its settings just to make sure. So we're going to do, 1920 by 1080. And we're going to be outputting at 60 FPS. Okay. So that's the face cam in the top left. Then I'm going to add another source. So let's add another video capture device. This one's going to be bench cam. This is going to be the other link. There we go. And again, we'll just dial in the resolution. The reason why I'm specifying the resolution here is just to make sure it doesn't automatically select some other resolution for some other reason. So if it has a problem with the correct resolution, it will just not work and then I'll know that something is wrong. So I'll put that in the top right of the screen. Now I want my meter cam. So Yeah, multimeter I'm going to call this. I can't remember what they used to be called, but I want to redo all of this anyway. So this is going to be the Logitech Brio. There it is. Custom 1920 by 1080. This camera should be able to do 60 FPS at 1080p. I think it's on a crap cable. Yeah, it's on a USB 2 cable. That's why it's not letting me select 60 FPS. But we don't need the meter to be at 60 FPS, so that's fine. Right, so that's going to go down here, and I'm going to rotate this so it's the right way up. So I'll right-click, transform, rotate. Now, the autofocus is hunting on this. I need to get the Logitech webcam software downloaded so I can put this onto manual focus. I'm going to quickly do that now. Hold on a moment, everyone. Oh, that's interesting. Logitune is detecting other cameras as well. I hope it's not going to interfere with those. Anyway, I'm going to select the Brio. And so it's already picked up that the Brio was set to 65 FOV and a little bit of zoom. I'm going to pull out that zoom. However, I do want to set manual focus. So image adjustments, turn off autofocus, and oh yeah, that's picked up about right actually. And I'm going to turn off auto white balance, and my lights are set to lights are set. I think I aim for 4200 in here. There we go. I usually have things a little bit cool. That looks about right for the meter in any case. That'll do. Cool. All right, that's that sorted. Close that now. Go away. There we go. Right. So now our multimeter cam isn't hunting all the time. So that's ready to capture that. Good. All right. So there's one more thing that we need to add in the bottom right, and that is going to be our capture. So video capture, and we'll call this one is going to be for the Elgato. So we'll call this Elgato. So I've got two capture cards in this PC. There's an Ava Media and an Elgato. The Elgato card is just general purpose capture. So if I plug in a desktop PC, this is the one that I'll plug it into. So I'm going to leave this just on fully automatic, just so it will auto detect whatever signal is being sent to it. So that's going to sit down there. And then finally, I'm also going to add a couple more. We're going to add another video capture device. This is going to be the microscope. So we'll call this scope. And this is going to be the Ava Media Live Gamer HD. And this, again, this is going to be 1080p. So I'm going to dial this one in at 60 FPS. And we'll put that down there as well. And so now, when I want to switch between these, if I'm using the scope, then I'll have that visible. If I'm not using the scope, we'll just make that not visible, and then the Elgato is visible instead. Likewise, I'm just going to lock all of these inputs as well, so I don't accidentally drag them around. So now they're locked, I can't move them on the canvas by accident. So there we go. So let's make the Elgato invisible. And let's just turn on the microscope and make sure that's working. There we go, right, and there's our microscope view. So if I hit record on the microscope, that'll just flick off and on again, and now it's at 60 FPS, so make of that what you will. This microscope does have a USB output, which I think can also do 1080p 60 FPS. However, it requires running more software on the computer, and I'd rather just use the HDMI capture, just because that feels a bit more versatile to me. Personal preference, it could be done over USB. I just would rather capture a HDMI output than have to mess around with the software for it. So that's that sorted. So we've got everything here. And if I bring over the bench cam, you can see how the bench cam would be in position. And let's just set those cameras up. So I'll just push the microscope to one side, and I'll start up the Insta360 software. Normally this software would show a preview, but because the camera is already being used by another program, it won't. So we can ignore this bit. So I've got two cameras connected. There's the two serial numbers of them. I can't remember which is which. I think 68TA is the bench cam. Let's just check that by zooming in. There we go. So there's my zoom control for the bench cam. And then the other one, will be the face cam. And I usually have the face cam just punched in a little bit because you can see I'm kind of far away at the moment. So I'm just going to push that into 1.5x. And that just brings me a bit more into frame, and then I can just adjust that a little bit. And in addition to that, we also just want to check the setup on these. So I usually have the exposure on automatic for these cameras. I will sometimes lock it off if I'm looking at, like, if I'm working on a bright white laptop or something like that. It might be blowing out the picture, so I'll just manually adjust it. Also, yeah, my white balance, I've got these set to 4100K. That's, it could probably be a bit warmer, actually. What if I go to 4200? Which is cooler now I think about it, but whatever. There we go. I'm just going to set that just to make sure that they're all consistent. For the people that know about this kind of thing, who are going, well, what are your lights set to? Well, my lights are variable. You know, like the ceiling lights are 5000K, but my key lights and bench lights are a bit warmer than that because it's good to have a mixture of color temperatures. It makes things look a bit better, basically. And I found 4200K looks about right for my cameras. This obviously all depends on your lighting, so your mileage may vary. Cool, that's fine. And the other thing I want to do is I just want to turn off the gesture controls for these cameras. The gesture controls can be good because, for example, if I switch on the AI tracking for the face cam, if I just switch that on with the gesture control, now the face cam will follow my face. Now this is kind of useful because it means that if I wander around frame, it's going to follow me. It's a really neat party trick of the Insta360 links. However, I generally have it turned off because the problem is that if I get up and walk off frame, the camera gets confused and doesn't necessarily find me when I come back. So I actually have the gestures turned off, and I use this feature just ad hoc when I feel like I need it. If I'm standing up and working on something, then I'll sometimes switch it on so it can follow me a bit. But yeah, I use this as and when I need it. So there we go. That's the camera setup. That's all done. Cool. Right, that's that. There's one more thing I'm going to add as well. I usually add in a desktop source. So I'm going to do display capture. So just a quick disclaimer. When you're recording or streaming in OBS, display capture is dangerous because it grabs whatever is on one of your monitors. And that makes it perilously easy to reveal personal information. Now, because I'm recording a video, this is less of a problem because I can catch that in editing, which 99% of the time I do. However, if you're live streaming, then yeah, there's no safety net there. So word of warning, be very careful when using display captures. Consider using window capture instead. However, because I'm recording and I know what I'm doing, I'm going to use display capture. So let's hit create new, and I want to grab the primary monitor. There we go. So that's just going to get an infinite window there because it's capturing the one we're looking at, and I'm going to put that in the top right. So I switch this on as and when I need it. So when I'm looking at schematics, I'll switch on the display capture so it shows my view of flex board view and schematics, or a website I'm looking at and stuff like that. So I'll leave that turned off and ready to go. Okay, so let's look at what else we've got. So the scope audio input, we don't need that. I'm going to take that off. So if we go into settings, that's probably added itself as an audio device. No, it hasn't. Oh, in that case, if I just go to the scope capture, audio output. Oh, interesting. There's no option to not capture that. I thought I could select don't capture audio. Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to mute this. So I'm going to mute it, and I'm just going to drag the slider down. So in case this accidentally gets unmuted, it will still be at minimum volume. So that's sorted. Am I sure I can't get rid of that? Oh, I can hide it. Yeah, I'll hide it. There we go. I'm also going to set this to the vertical layout because I think it's more space efficient. Right, let's get my microphone set up. So to set up my microphone, so this is already set to use the Samsung microphone. Now I'm going to go to filters. You'll notice that the output from the microphone, even though it's in front of my face, is extremely low. So firstly, we need to boost this in Windows. So I'm going to quickly open up the Windows preferences. So I'm going to go sound settings, then I'm going to use more sound settings. I prefer the old style one. You can find all of these settings in the modern settings. However, I just know where they are in the legacy menu, so this is where I'm looking. So for recording, while I'm here, I'm going to do some tidying up. We've got a lot of inputs here because we've got 3 webcams connected. We've got 2 capture cards. There are a lot of audio inputs here. I disable anything that I explicitly know that I'm not going to use because you don't want this stuff to come on unexpectedly. I have lost videos before because there's been a devastating audio echo on the soundtrack that was just irrecoverable. So I'm going to just disable these inputs. Ava Media, we're not going to use that one. Let's see. Digital input Ava Media, we're not going to use that. Game capture, I'll leave this one here. We will have this available. And Logitech Brio, we don't want that one either. Right, where's my microphone? There it is, Samsung CO1U. So let's properties on that. And for you want to experiment with the input levels here. So there's two major factors for input. There is microphone gain and microphone amplification. Now, my terminology might be wrong here, and people who know studio audio can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But the important thing is, this slider here affects how sensitive the microphone is. So if I dial this right up, it's going to hear me from across the room. But you can see already that it's peaking down here. That solid red, that means we're peaking. That is distortion. We don't want that. And also, we don't want to hear road noise and laughter from outside and stuff like that. So we're going to turn this down. And I think I usually set this one to about 85%. Come on, give me that 85. There we go. So that gives me 85. So this gives me a decent amount of pickup so I can be half a meter away from the microphone, but it will cut out a lot of room noise. And yeah, it means that if there is child outside, they are less likely to get picked up by the microphone. So that encloses us to the desk space. However, this is still kind of low, so I'm going to boost this up a little bit more. So I'm going to add some filters, and I'm going to add, firstly, I'm going to add a limiter. So the limiter, this is a brick wall limiter, and this makes sure that we cannot possibly peak. So I'm going to set this to -3. And what this is going to do is at -3 decibels, it will just brick wall it. So now if I shout into the microphone like this, watch your ears. Ah! Notice that I just shouted at the microphone and it didn't peak into the red. That brick wall limiter is just rolling off the top to make sure that you don't get that horrid 12-year-old on an Xbox microphone distortion. So even if I suddenly burst out laughing at something or there's a really loud beep, it won't ruin everyone's eardrums. Then the other filter I'm going to add is a compressor. So let's put in a compressor filter. I can't remember how... I'm going to need to tinker with the numbers on this. I think I generally have it set... I think I generally leave these mostly at the defaults. So what the compressor is going to do is it's going to increase the volume of my voice when I'm being quiet, and it's going to decrease the volume of my voice when I'm being loud. So it's going to try and normalize things and reduce the dynamic range. Now, normally you want, for like cinema and music, you want dynamic range. However, I'm making informational content. It's really important that people can hear my voice clearly. So I want to try and keep my voice at as regular a volume as possible. Yeah, I don't know if this is going to... Well, let's just finish setting it up. I'm also going to add in a little bit of output gain. I can't remember how much. Let's try 5 decibels. And I'm just going to look at the bar. That hasn't made much difference. Okay, how about 10? And so now we're just peeking into the orange, and that's a healthy place to be. If I were live streaming, I'd probably want to be a bit deeper into orange than that, possibly just touching just shy of red, like at -10, just to try and get as much output volume as possible so people aren't having to crank their volume. However, don't forget, I can increase the volume of this in post while editing, and I actually usually do. When I'm editing, I usually have another +2 or +4 decibels on my voice. So I can add that in later, And this just means that the actual recording volume won't peak too much if I lean into the microphone or anything like that, you know. So it's worth noting that I'm currently recording on a lapel mic, so you guys aren't hearing any of this. We're just watching that that meter there. So that's the audio setup. Desktop audio, there might be times when I want to capture what's coming out of my computer, but that's pretty rare. So again, I'm going to bring that down to 0 and mute it just to make sure that is never accidentally on. So you guys won't hear tones or beeps or notifications from my computer unless I've very deliberately turned this on. And I think that's everything. So this is the basic setup that I would use for recording. This is ready to go. So one thing I will do, I'm going to add in another scene for the occasions when I'm streaming or doing other stuff. So let me show you an example of another scene. I'm going to add in a bench with face scene. So bench with face. So I've just disappeared, and I've also spelt that wrong. I'll rename it. Bench with face. Cool. So for this scene, this is going to be more intended for if I'm live streaming, so I don't want the tile format. So I want just the bench thing. So let's add a video capture. We'll add one that's already here. We'll add the bench cam. So I'll just stretch this out to full screen. And we'll add another capture. We'll add the face cam back in. And we're going to make this a bit smaller. So I'll pull this back to about, I don't know, I'm making this up for the sake of it. I'm just going to make it so the vertical height goes to 4. Well, that's good enough. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to hold Alt and just crop that in a little bit. There we go. And if we just lock those two sources, now we've got a scene that looks like the video. So if I'm live streaming, so I can't edit this on the fly, now I can switch to a view that looks like what you guys would see. So there we go. So that's the typical view. So now if I'm live streaming to YouTube because I'm doing a One Guy Talks Tech or something like that, this is the scene that I would use for that. And likewise, I can throw in another video capture. So let's just put in the, is the scope still on? Yes, it is. Let's just add in the scope again. Make that full screen. And I'll drag this down low because we want the face cam to be at the top. And so now I can switch to the scope. So I can switch between the scope and the bench cam on the fly there. So you can see how I'm using OBS to do everything on the fly. Is there anything else I've forgotten? I think that's it. I'm basically set up. I will inevitably add more things to this. I'll add some more scenes. There's probably some more sources I'll add. You can see that now I can switch between scenes on the fly. So this is what you'll see streamers doing. This is what you'll see streamers doing on Twitch and stuff like that. If they go to their Be Right Back screen, they'll have a scene that is their Be Right Back scene. So they click on that and it switches to that scene with these sources. And you can have whatever sources on each scene you want. So that's it. That's how my OBS setup works. So that's it. Let's see. Yeah, that's everything. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to cut to the editing bench and I'll briefly show you the editing process because we've come this far. See you guys after the cut. Alright, we're home at the editing rig. So what I'll do now is I've taken the videos that I've recorded at work, put them on an external SSD, and I bring them home. And we have something that looks like this. So here's the raw footage from the recent HP video I did. Here's the intro of it. In fact, there's 18 minutes worth of this. So there'll be multiple videos of this depending on whether I did it in multiple sessions, whether I came back to get parts, and so on and so forth. And this is what we end up with. So the first thing I need to do is I need to chop this up into 4 video streams again. And if you're thinking, wow, that seems kind of inefficient to record, that seems kind of inefficient to merge everything in OBS only to split it up again for editing. And yeah, it is inefficient. And again, there are better ways of doing this. I'll talk more about that in a minute after I've shown you the workflow, because I'm going to show you how I currently do it and then say how I think I should be doing it. And hey, maybe more professional video editors in the comments can be like, okay, here's a better solution for what you're trying to do. Whatever. So we've got this video that we need to chop up again, and we need to chop it up so I have 4 separate streams again, and also I need to transcode it into a different format because I edit in Vegas 14, which is ancient. However, I'll talk about it more later. Stay with me. So I edit in Vegas 14, which doesn't understand anything, so we need to put this into MP4 or H.264. And as I mentioned earlier on, I'm recording in an interruptible or streaming format, which is good for file integrity, but we don't need file integrity now the recording is done. We need it to be in a nice, simple format. So to transcode it, I'm going to use Handbrake. So if I fire up Handbrake, and let's just open a single file. So let's just drop this one in there for funsies. And so in Handbrake, I have pre-made a bunch of presets. So here I've got top left. So if I select my top left custom preset, that is going to it's going to crop to 1920 by 1080 in the top left of the picture. And then it's set up to use the NVENC encoder and output as H.264, maintaining the frame rate. And likewise, if I then do top right, there's the bench cam, bottom left, there's the multimeter cam, bottom right, and there's the scope one, which on this particular one doesn't have anything in it. So typically I will selectively do these. If I know there's nothing on the scope, or well, for this specific video, there was nothing on the there's nothing on the multimeter either. The multimeter doesn't get used in this video, so I just won't bother transcoding that part. I think we just need top left and top right. So I'll do that. I'll add those to the queue, top left, add to queue, and that will spit out into my Handbrake folder here. So once I've got the output files in there, I end up with the separate streams. So if I actually go to the project file for this, that was HP AIO BIOS. So in here, you can see we've now got all the separate files. So there's just the face cam. Then there's the bench cam for this section. So you get the idea. So now I've got the separate video streams from the cameras again. So this step is kind of a pain in the ass, but it doesn't take that long because Handbrake on NVENC is really freaking fast these days, especially if you have a baller computer. So it doesn't take that much time. Again, I'll talk more about more optimal formats in a minute. So yeah, there we are. So I've got these things. So what I would do now is let's make a new template. I'm just going to grab a couple of these. So let's see, where's my template project? So copy paste the template, and I'll just keep that as template copy for now. And I'm going to put a bunch of video files in there. I'm going to grab those ones just because that's what we're working with. Copy those and put them in there. And let's open that project. So in my template here, my template already has the video intro put in there. It's got my host name there, just so people stop calling me Adam. My name is Graham, if now you know. And I've got all of my tracks preset. So some of these tracks will show in this one, some of them we won't, but let's keep going. So I'm going to grab these and put them in the project. And so firstly, I'm going to start with the bench cam, which goes down here on under A roll for the thing that's being filmed. Then I'm going to chuck top left is the face cam. I'm going to put that under the face cam section up here. So now we've got these, and then if I have video footage from the scope, that I stick that under B-roll, and then I put in the multimeter cam under DMM there, digital multimeter, that goes on that track. And then in addition to that, I usually have the Paul Daniels Type C power meter. That is a crop of the multimeter view. So that will be a duplicate one there, and so on. So we end up with a bunch of tracks here. Once I've added them in, I delete the excess audio tracks because we don't need the audio track for that, so we'll just delete that. And we end up with a bunch of video streams and the audio stream that are all perfectly in sync because they've all come out of the same source file. So now we're ready to go. So for this one, On this face track, I've already got a crop set up that puts it up in the top left. And then finally, I usually do an extra crop. So I'll click on pan and crop here, and I've got a preset here for 1280. So that is a 1280 by 10. That's a 1280 by 1024 crop. And then I'll just manually position that for just where I happen to be standing for that specific video, because no matter how much you preset things, cameras get nudged. Sometimes my stool is slightly to the left. Sometimes I'm sitting a bit further back or forward. So yeah, I just change this for wherever I am. And you can see up here that that's just moving me about. So I position that so it's about right. So now we've got the face cam and we've got the bench cam, and I can start editing. And from this point, it's a standard edit. I start watching through the footage, and where there's dead space, we split the clips and I delete the bit that doesn't need to be there anymore, and so on and so forth. And that's that. That is essentially my editing pipeline. So what's wrong with this? Well, first of all, as said, Vegas 14 is ancient. Anyone looking at this is going to be like, what the hell is this Windows 98 nonsense? So yeah, the reason why I'm using 14 is that it's just really fast. I have tried using modern versions of Vegas all the way up to like the latest version, I think, and they just feel laggy. Playback is laggy. By the time I've got a couple of whoops, that's let's just mute the output. There. By the time I've got a couple of video streams running that have crops and transforms done on them, I just struggle to get 60 FPS playback. And like, it's not for lack of horsepower. This PC that I'm working on is a 9800X3D with a 4080 in it. You shouldn't need that much horsepower just to play back a couple of video streams, right? But for some reason or other, the modern versions of Vegas struggle with this. Part of the reason is because I'm editing H.264 video. So that is a compressed file stream. If I was a professional video creator, I would be recording in some kind of lossless format, and then editing in a lossless format that is uncompressed, so the editor isn't having to decompress on the fly. And that, I think, is the source of this problem. However, Vegas 14 just seems to be old enough that whatever decompressor it's using will just run on a potato. So if you throw enough horsepower at it, you can just brute force through this problem. Now, the solution to this is in the future, I do want to using DaVinci Resolve, because that is free software and it is mainstream professional software, and there's a billion support for it. No one is going to question you if you say you edit in Resolve. So that's what I need to learn. And I think what I would be doing in Resolve is I would be recording in OBS in a lossless format, same 4K canvas, but just recording in a lossless format, and then I could drop the 4K. I've lost it now. Then I can drop this source file into Resolve, duplicate it by however many times necessary, and crop it in the editor. No transcoding required, and just completely cut out that transcoding step. And because Resolve is modern and has proper GPU accelerated decoding and everything, I would assume it would have no problem with that. So that's what I should be moving to. So the only other exotic thing I'm doing with this is I use an exporter called vocoder. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. So when I'm done, I do render as, and I'm exporting using vocoder, which is a third-party plugin. I use the free version of it, but basically this adds hardware video encoding. So NVIDIA NVENC, it adds this into Vegas 14. And vocoder can be added in system wide, so it adds NVENC support to theoretically anything that is trying to export to a video output kind of thing. Go search it for more information. It's an interesting app. Unfortunately, I think after it went paid for, the classic version that I'm using here, the free version, feels slower. I'm not saying that they nerfed the free version, but it doesn't seem to work as well as it used to. Don't know. At any rate, that gives me NVIDIA NVENC encoding on the output, which makes my exporting slightly less painful because it's not having to do everything on CPU. But Vegas is still doing all of these transformations and cropping on CPU, which is rough. It means that my actual final export is still kind of slow. It is at best 1x real time, but after I start exporting, I'll typically just minimize Vegas and do something else, which will make the export take even longer. But I can run most games while an export is running, and it will just prioritize the game. So there's that. So that's it. After that, I end up with a final output, which I then upload to YouTube. And then I make a dorky thumbnail for it, and that's it. So I think that's everything. So that is my hardware setup, my recording setup, my video workflow with all of its flaws bare on display. You may now mock me in the comments for how awful this setup is, but hopefully this wildly convoluted system might have something in it that makes some people go, oh, that's an interesting idea. I could use that for something. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. This has been longer than I wanted it to be, but there it is. See you all soon. Bye.